Shut up and sit down.
Hello, my friend. You are listening to the Dance Studio Scaled podcast, the number one place for innovative marketing, retention strategies, and business growth ideas made just for dance studio owners. Now, this isn't your average business podcast. We're here to shake things up, simplify the hustle, and focus on real, actionable insights. I'm your host, Jen Dalton, and after 30 years of running studios, coaching owners, and scaling businesses, I know one thing's for sure. There's no one size fits all in this industry. You've got the passion, and I've got the tools to help you take it to the next level. So hit that subscribe button, grab a coffee, and let's scale your studio together. Well, hello there, Dance Fam, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Dance Studio Scale podcast. Now, in last week's episode, I spoke about the 5 things that I would always revisit every July, and it was almost like my pre-planning before I would start planning for a new year. If you haven't listened to it, I do suggest you go back because it is a really good time to listen to that episode and just to start doing a little bit of reflection so you can realign what's working, what's not. And that way you can then build into next year everything that's going to work for you and get rid of things that aren't. Now, if you did listen to it, I truly hope that you were able just to put a little bit of time aside to put some time into those questions and to think about what it is you could be doing right now, because my thoughts moving forward with these episodes is just really now zooming in on really specific things that we can start building on. And so that brings us to today's episode. And one of the questions that I get often asked is when a studio owner is ready to bring on a studio manager, or maybe they've already got a staff member that they want to give a title to a staff manager because maybe they're maxed out and they're needing more help, or maybe they're wanting to step into their leadership a little bit more. And they know that that means delegating some of those tasks, and you're going to have to give them away. But it's tricky, right? It's when you know you need help in your business, but you're just not quite sure where to start or what that help should even look like. You know, the questions like, what should they actually be doing? What can I realistically hand over? And how do I structure this in the right way? Now, I absolutely get this because I lived it. And so in today's episode, I thought I would just talk you through the exact way that the role of studio manager evolved inside my own business. Now, this is not just like the polished end result of what it looked like, but this was the messy, the real, like behind the scenes of how it all started for me. So nowhere better to start than the beginning. So right at the start, it was just me. I was doing everything, which was easy. I was young. I had no family. I had no debt. I had no expenses. I was living at home, and the studio was small. So I built up over time. I was doing everything. Now, at that time, my mum was always a huge support right from the very early days. She, at the time, was still working her full-time job as well, but really did help out where she could, and a lot of that was just in support. Then in about, I think it was 2010, my husband and I, made a big decision that we would offer to match the wage that my mum was on to come and work in the business. Now, this was a huge investment that we were going to make, but it just then allowed us to grow the business. Now, thankfully, she said yes, and she took over so many things that were eating into my time. And quite honestly, the stuff that I don't really like doing, things like the finances, payroll, accounts, the staff admin, costume management, and she could always jump into reception where needed. I mean, that is probably the best part about having your mum on board. I could completely trust her with all this stuff as well. So that was really good. And the other benefit with having my mum was the fact at that point I had small children, so she could help with care if needed. She could pick up, she could drop off. So there was a lot of benefits in doing that. But, as I said, it was the biggest investment we ever made, but was also honestly the best investment that we made, because she truly allowed us to change the trajectory of the growth of our studio. And it was from that point we were able to truly scale the business. Because once I wasn't buried in the admin, I could then finally focus on the growth. So over the next 4 years, the studio scaled to around, I was replacing and adding about 200 students per year. So it was huge. It was huge, fast growth. And it wasn't because I was suddenly better at marketing, but because I had finally have the headspace to lead. I could focus on retention, I could build better systems, and I was able to really support and train a growing team. Now, of course, like any stage of growth, I eventually became that bottleneck again. And that's when I knew it was time to get some formalized roles inside the business and to start building a true team structure. So it was then at that point that I brought on the first, I say, official studio manager. And again, I think it was about 2014. And this is Taylor. She was my cousin's daughter, and she had actually moved down from Queensland. She wanted to do some work in Sydney, and she was just a beautiful option. So she reached out and she wanted to do some teaching. And that's when the conversation started, like, would you like to try and do a little bit more? So what I thought, I'm just going to talk you through what each of these versions look like, the tasks that they did for me, and then how it evolved. So my first one, Taylor, so she was definitely doing a lot of teaching. She helped develop and run our birthday party. So we started that at the point when she came in, and she was managing the staff for that, and she wrote the programming, she organized the invitation. So she really took that on. I handed over the phone for the first time, which felt really nice. She was able to answer phone calls. She was able to do some face-to-face, so she could jump into the reception desk if she needed to. She started with just basic email responses. So any general inquiries, she would deal with those and send off the appropriate information or make the phone calls that she needed to. She also was actually the first one to launch our performance teams and our social media. She really got deep into our social media because it was something that we hadn't really done much of back then. She was very much wearing all the hats, but it really did allow me to get out of that first layer of the day-to-day tasks in a small, but it really was a powerful way. So even though they were small tasks, I could feel the impact, and I could see, slowly but surely, this was making a difference for me. And we had Taylor for a couple of years, and it was fabulous. And then sadly for me, happily for her, she moved back to Queensland to be with her family. But I knew that I now had this role that I needed replaced because I'd become accustomed to not doing these smaller tasks. So that then brings us to my next studio manager. And she was found through a friend of a friend, and she was perfect. She had been overseas dancing, and she was coming back home. She conveniently lived near me as well, so that was even better. And she came on with more structure, because I could say this is what my previous studio owner was doing, studio manager was doing, and I would like that plus these few other ideas, and so I was able to sort of develop the role a little bit further. So she was teaching, doing a lot of the majority of the teaching, but also started managing my team. So taking that side away a little bit, like just helping with that. She was handling emails, she was running some of the teacher check-ins and doing a bit of leadership with the junior staff. So we have our teacher training program going through, so she was quite hands-on with that. She brought some great fresh ideas to the table and helped with the innovation side of things, and honestly played a massive part in getting us through our first lockdown. With the way we decided to run our first lockdown proved to be, and I have spoken about this in other episodes, but it was a lot of hard work, and she really gave her all to help and support throughout that time. Now, again, Shannon was with us for quite a few years, but then had to leave. Suddenly her husband got a transfer. He was moving up to Queensland, and so she obviously had to go with him. And it happened fast. I don't know what it is with Queensland. Yes, I do. I know why it is, because Queensland is beautiful and it's hot, and I'd love to live there too. That's why they keep going back to Queensland. However, it was tough because it was a really fast and sudden, I've got to go. And so to replace her, it did leave me, honestly, in a little bit of panic and completely overwhelmed. But it also taught me how valuable that kind of leadership support really was, because I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine taking back on all of that myself. So I then had to find someone else. And again, so this is the next evolution of the role. So this is now in 2021, and I advertised for a studio manager role, and that was partly paid as well. So in Seek, Indeed, I had on the Star Now website, I had organic posts out actually advertising this as a job role. And because I knew exactly what I needed and exactly what I was looking for. This role was a full-time role. So I was able to really, it was like a real job. And I was very lucky to have an application, and that was Brooke, who then really stepped in and took over what I believe a true management position within the studio. And when you think about it, like, a management role is massive. If they're managing your business, they should be across everything and they should be taking over. So the things that Brooke did is she was teaching. She was definitely doing some teaching. I think it's really important, especially in the beginning, for them to be able to do some teaching, just to get to know the kids, to get to know what the culture is like in the classroom. And it also allows for a greater connection with the rest of the team, the teaching team. That's my opinion. She also ran our performance programs and really stepped that up. She was liaising with families. She was managing parent complaints. She was answering emails, pretty much all the emails. She took care of enrollments, the face-to-face communication. She helped with a lot of decision making. So this was a new thing where I was collaborating with her a lot. So deciding on staffing and what teachers would suit what classes. When it came to timetabling, we'd do that. Well, I'd do a version and I'd run it by her and see what she thought. Then she'd do a significant version, and then we'd come back together. And also a lot of our new offers, like things that were working, things that weren't, things that were, trending that we thought we could offer. She even had her own credit card for the studio, so she could make purchases, and I think it was up to $500 without needing me to sign off. And so that meant if we needed studio stickers, or we needed more drinks for the fridge, or we needed toilet paper, like, she could just get stuff if she knew, without having to bug me, or is it okay, or could you pick up? So that was incredible. That level of autonomy was like a real game changer. And eventually Brooke is the one who bought the studio, so she's now running it incredibly well. Okay, so that was the evolution for me. So let's just talk about that. What it can look like, what it shouldn't look like, and how to shape the role in a way that frees you up without letting things slip through the cracks. All right, so let's dive in. So you hit that point in your business where you just know that you need help, and maybe you're craving more space to lead, or maybe you're simply ready to step back from being involved in every face-to-face, hands-on moment at the studio. Maybe you've got young kids. Maybe you're caring for a parent. There are so many reasons that you may want to step back, and it's all okay, and you don't have to feel guilty about that. But this is where you're going to start asking yourself these questions. Who is it that I should be bringing in? How should it work? And most confusing of all is, like, what should they actually be doing? And I know that it can feel paralyzing, so I'm just going to strip it back. And this is how I advise studio owners when they are walking through this process. This is where we start. So if you're in a similar situation, you can grab a pen or make notes on your phone, however you make notes. All right. So the first thing I would suggest, so there's four things here. First thing I suggest is that you just list everything that you are currently doing. Everything, literally everything. Doesn't matter how big or small it is, make a list. Also track how long it's taking you. So if Monday morning you jump straight onto the laptop to check the emails, how long does it take you to get through and read through all the emails from the weekend? How long does it take you to reply? So I want you to try and be as specific as you can, and that's going to help later down the track when you are giving a particular task to someone else, because you have an idea of how long it's taking you, so you can realistically have that conversation about how long it should take for them. Okay, so that's the first thing to do. Now, a question I get asked is, how long should you do this? Now, in the perfect world, over a month is, 12 months is perfect, obviously, because you'd then be able to list everything. However, that's probably not realistic. If you can get a month, like 4 weeks, is going to give you a really good indication of everything. But if not, just start with 1 week, because as you know, most things are cyclical. You'll be doing similar things each week, apart from the big events and things that happen in the year, but you can work through those as they come. However, just get as much as you can down, so it's giving you a place to start with some of those tasks. Okay, the second thing is, I want you to go through that list and highlight or mark the things that you want to stop doing, but also, and this is key, I want you to also highlight the things that realistically can be handed over to someone else. Now, this might be things that you don't want to hand over, and that's okay. I just want you to mark it, because the reality is, right, you may love, say for example, you may love doing social media. You may love doing the creative stuff on Canva, which, that's totally fine. However, as you are starting to scale your business, you're starting to, really step into that leadership, you have to work out where your time is best spent. And that may not be in Canva. So as I said, you don't have to do anything, but just mark the things that could realistically be handed to somebody else. Okay. Now, the third thing to do is think about the role, and is there someone who could step into it? Now, sometimes the right person is already on your team. You may have picked them out, you've seen them in public, you've seen them deal with the parents, you've seen them in the classroom, maybe they're a teacher. Sometimes it could be a friend that you know, or even a parent. Now, I know some people never hire a parent. Sure, I know there are studio owners who have parents working for them and they are doing great. So it's just a matter of being cautious, of course, and setting those really clear boundaries and expectations. Okay, and finally, the fourth thing to think about is to consider then how much time you're going to allocate to this role. Now, for me, this is the hardest part. And you'll be questioning, will this be a full-time role? Will it be part-time? Will it be casual? How many hours are you going to give them? Are you adding hours to an already, for a person who's already teaching? Because their hours will directly impact what they can take on, but it's also going to impact how much it's going to cost you. And that's where it often gets tricky, because you start wondering, so how long should these tasks take? And you can go off how long it takes you. It's it only takes me half an hour to do that. But then how long will it actually take someone else who maybe at the beginning isn't as fast or as experienced? And the other thing is our business is seasonal. We have businesses where we have time in our year where we are so flat out. We're working 6 till 10 o'clock at night and we are flat out. But then there are other times when we can have some downtime. And sometimes over that Christmas break, it can be quite quiet. So if you've got someone who you're paying a full-time wage to, it can be hard to fill those hours. So it is so hard. And also with, a lot of the tasks that you are handing over, they need to be done. Things like replying to emails or returning calls, managing enrollments. So they're the 4 things I want you to consider when you're very first starting. Now, once you get clear on that role and what they'll be responsible for, it's then time to do these. These are the next 2 things that I would do. So the first thing would be to set really clear expectations. Write them down, communicate them really clearly. And the big one is don't assume anything is obvious. Well, obviously, this is what you would do. That's a dangerous word. Stay away from it. I always think of anytime I'm explaining something or there's expectations that I'm explaining or communicating, I think of me explaining it like I'm speaking to a group of 4 and 5-year-olds who need to understand exactly what I'm saying. And I will say, you may already have an understanding of this. However, I want you to A, B, C, D. So, be as clear as you can because it's not fair for them if they are left to assume as well and then they do it incorrectly or you're not happy with that and then you're frustrated and angry. So, there are definitely good reasons to have those expectations set. And then the second one is creating a solid training process. Now, this is where your SOPs or your playbooks come in. Now, if you've already got them, this is where you use them. This is part of the purpose, right? So SOPs, for anyone who hasn't heard that term before, these are your standard operating procedures, or a more fun way to say it is playbooks. This is also something that we are very big on in the mastermind, building out these SOPs and playbooks so that you only have to do this training once. And then then it's already done for you. So when you have to do this again, it's not going to fall back on you. Now, if you haven't started your SOPs or your playbooks, this could be the perfect time to start. And then when you're doing these training processes, I recommend recording, whether it's a screen recording or recording yourself doing these tasks as you train, because it means your studio manager can refer back to them instead of asking you every time. Because this is now where the next challenge tends to pop up, because you start feeling like they should be getting more done in the time you've given them. Meanwhile, they feel like there isn't enough time and they start asking you for more hours, which is usually a hard no at this stage because, the cost and everything. So you can then move into that next level of thinking about some KPIs, so key performance indicators, for anyone who hasn't heard that. But here's the thing with those, I honestly believe after experience with this whole process that the KPIs also evolve with the role. So for me, I couldn't perfectly set them in one place. We had an idea, but it was better just to wait a few weeks, observe, refine, and then lock them in. And again, it's just giving them boundaries and it's giving them expectations to help them get the jobs done. So if you're listening and thinking, yes, this is exactly how I'm feeling, you're not alone. It's easy for me to say now that I've been through the process, but try not overthink it. You just can start here. All right, so following these steps, so everything I've spoken about, stick with me now because I'm now going to walk you through just some 5 core responsibilities generally that a studio manager can help you out with that will free your time up. Okay, so 5 core responsibilities of a high impact studio manager. You've done that groundwork. You've clarified the role, the hours, the expectations, and the training. Now here's the practical bit, what they actually do. Now, every studio is going to be different. The way you run, the things you have to get done, even the season that we're in, whether you're ridiculously busy or maybe it's really quiet. But just as an example for you or something to keep in the back of your mind if you're starting this process, here are 5 key areas that I believe your studio manager should eventually own, if not be across. Okay, now you might not hand it over all on day one, which I strongly recommend not doing that, but this is the direction that you're generally heading. Okay, so the first one is enrollment admin and parent communication. So your studio manager needs to become the go-to for new inquiries, trial follow-ups, ongoing parent questions, and day-to-day communications. Now, they help maintain the studio's tone of voice and ensure that families feel seen and supported without everything funneling back to you. Okay, so that's the first one, enrollment admin and parent communication. Now, the next thing would be the timetable logistics and teacher support. Now, they are the central point for staffing updates, room changes, managing class lists, supporting teachers when little things start. They are being addressed before they become big things. So they're not babysitting your staff, but they are removing the day-to-day interruptions from your plate. And for me, this was probably the hugest change particularly when Brooke came in. She sat in between me and the team. Now, I love my team and I knew them inside and out, and we did a lot of training. I was heavily involved. However, if they had a problem, if they had a question, if they had a concern, they would go to Brooke. And Brooke then decided what I needed to know. And she just was excellent at letting me know what I needed to know. But most of the time she was dealing with it. She was also the person who, if complaints came in or if someone had a query or a question, she dealt with it. Whether she answered it herself or redirected them somewhere, it was being dealt with without me having to put my head in it. Of course, any of the big stuff, any of the major stuff, she would send through to me. She'd let me know and I'd make the decision, or if I had to make that phone call, I would do that. But that to me was the most powerful point of having that studio manager. She became that buffer because then it allowed me to do other things, which I will get into, like exactly what you do as the studio owner. Okay, so the next thing is the concert and events coordination. So whether that's from costume notes to running orders, liaising with teachers and parents, your studio manager is the person keeping the timelines, the tasks, and the communication on track. And yes, this is one area where a checklist or a playbook will save your life. So again, if you've got that playbook set in your standard operating procedures, this is something that she can refer back to, or she or he can refer a link to somebody else to say, this is where you can find the information for this. The next one is studio upkeep and daily operations. You want them across things like your supplies, sign-in sheets, studio cleanliness, like open and closing procedures, problem solving the everyday things that can just happen. If something's broken, if it's confusing or it's missing, they are the ones who are on it. And then the last part would be studio culture and customer care. And possibly the most important one, but often the most underrated. And that means greeting the families. It means holding space for feedback or concerns, setting that tone for how your studio feels. Whether that's a warm, professional, consistent feel, whatever it is, she needs to exude that. They become the friendly face of your business when you're not there. And now this is huge for retention and for trust. Now, a lot of studio owners will get stuck at this point, and I'll tell you why. Because their ego gets in the way. You have to be in a position where you are okay when kids are running through the studio door and they run straight to your studio manager's legs and give them a big cuddle. And they're like so happy to see them and they squeal with excitement because they're going to run straight past you. And that's because they don't really know who you are. And at the end of my studio time, there were a lot of people who didn't know who I was. And it was only once I got up on the stage at the concert and spoke that they realized who I actually was. I was totally okay with it. I actually was probably a little bit too good with that. I was really happy. I loved that the students would come and they ran straight to their teachers and they loved and adored them. But I know for a lot of studio owners that can be hard. And whether that's because it's personal, whether it's an ego thing, but stepping into leadership, that is just that's just one part that you have to be okay with. So this could be a good start for that. All right. So they are the 5 things, those 5 core responsibilities of a high impact studio manager. So moving on next, what should you still do as the studio owner? Now, let's be clear, just because you have a studio manager, it doesn't mean that you should disappear into the background. Now, I did do this a little bit with my second studio manager. I I did step back a little bit too far and I got caught because all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not quite sure. I wasn't across things. I wasn't, staying accustomed to what was being said. So there were a few little things which was excellent learning for me, because then it changed when I made, the position evolved. And I do know another very good studio friend who she sort of did the same thing, stepped back a little bit, had her babies, and then things sort of start going a little bit awry when you're not there all the time. So you do have to find that balance. But here's what still sits firm with you as the studio owner once you have the perfect manager in place. The first thing is the big picture. You are in charge of that, your vision and the long-term goals. You need to be all over the numbers. So your budgeting, the pricing, and the income strategy. Really important that you stay across that. The core offers and your business model. So again, this is like higher level thinking, because this is where you're stepping into now. Like, this is the process of scaling, those thought processes about what it is that's going to take your studio to its next level. That's for you to work through and decide. And then finally, the hiring and firing. So this obviously should sit with you. However, I always did have input from my later studio managers, because they had more of an idea of the actual nitty gritty and that layer one level of being in the classroom, in the waiting room. So they knew what was being said. I was being informed, and then we would make the hiring and firing decisions together. Okay, because you are still the captain of the ship. Okay, your studio manager just runs the engine room, which is a really good way to look at it. Okay, how to define or reset the roles without chaos. So now you've gone through all that process. You know exactly what's coming up. You know what you've got to do. How do you start? Now, if you're already a few steps in, like maybe you have someone in the role, but it's feeling messy, just don't panic. You don't have to tear it all down and start again. So here's what you can do. You can just stop and then start and then continue. So what's not working, what needs to be added, and what's working really well. So you could just basically sit down with them and go through those questions together. You can clarify what success looks like. So you can give them a really clear outcome-focused tasks. So for example, you can say all email inquiries need to be responded to within 24 hours. And this was one that I always had. And any phone calls or messages, they had to be phoned back as soon as possible. So before 8 p.m, if it was a weeknight, because we were generally at the studio at that point. And then from 9 a.m. in the morning, they had to be phoned back straight away. And I've said it before, I remember so many people when I would ring them back and say, oh, you left a message. I'm so sorry. I was teaching. I wasn't able to answer the phone. How can I help you? And the amount of times people would say, oh, thank you so much for calling me back. We've called 5 other studios in the area and no one even calls us back. So that was really important to me from the very early days. And that was something that followed me all the way to the very end. Okay, the next thing is to use tools like Loom for training. So I spoke about like recording and screen recording or videoing your training so that you only have to do it once, then you can upload it and you can add that link into your SOPs or into your playbooks. And so you can use Loom, which you can get for free, and you can record yourself doing the task so that then whoever is taking on that role or whoever's asking questions that need some clarification, you can let them re-watch it and revisit it instead of constantly having to bug you or asking you the questions and interrupting what you're doing. And then finally is to start tracking. So I don't want to get too in depth with those complex KPIs to start with, but you do need clarity. So if you think they should be getting through more work, and they maybe are feeling maxed out, then something's off. So this is where it's your cue to either look at the hours, look at the tasks, or the expectations. And so really, that's it in a nutshell. So wrapping that up into a nice little package, empowerment comes from the clarity. So the studio manager role can be a game changer when it's done with intention. So when you define it clearly, you train slowly but thoroughly and continue to refine as you go. That's when you'll start seeing those real benefits of you get to step back. They grow into the role. Your studio runs more smoothly, and you then have the mental space to lead and to grow the business. Okay, so that was a long episode. I hope you were able to get something out of it. If you are listening and you're thinking, yes, this is exactly what I need help with, you are not alone. These are real questions from real studio owners that ask me. Like sometimes weekly I get these questions, and that's why these episodes are made for you to listen to be able to implement and make work for you straight away. If you are thinking, oh yes, I really do need some extra help, this is exactly what we work with inside the Dance Studio Scaled Mastermind. This is the kind of strategic support that we offer. You get clarity on your team structure, you get guidance on the hiring and the role building and the ongoing accountability to make sure that your business works for your life. Now, if this is something that you are considering, I would love for you to pop your details onto our waitlist. It is open now. I don't take people all year round. We have another intake a little bit later in the year, but our waitlist is growing and there is strictly limited numbers. So if this is something that you think you may be looking towards joining, if you're the type of support, then jump onto the waitlist. I will give you a link if you just want to send me a DM in Instagram and just put the word manager, and I'll just send you the link. Once you're on the waitlist, there's no commitment. There's nothing there. All it is just reserving a spot in order, and I will reach out and we'll jump on a quick call and we can have a chat about what it would look like if you did want to join the mastermind. I just want to reassure you that you don't have to do this alone. Let's build the right support around you, and it's just one smart step at a time. That's how we get there. And I just want to encourage you all to keep going, keep your head up. We've got the exciting part of the year coming up. I know it is busy. I know it can get overwhelming. If you get to that point, just stop, take a deep breath, and just try and appreciate what it is that you do have. Enjoy it, because you've put in so much hard work and time. You should be enjoying and looking at the wins and celebrating along the way. All right, everyone, I hope you have a super great week. Any feedback, any questions you have specifically on this episode, just shoot me a DM. I love having conversations in Instagram with people in Messenger. And let's keep going. Thanks for tuning in to the Dance Studio Scaled podcast. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other studio owners who would love it too. And let's keep the conversation going. Follow me on Instagram at Jen Dalton for more tips, insights, and behind-the-scenes moments to help you simplify and scale your studio. Until next time, keep dreaming big and taking action. I'll see you back here soon.